Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Jordan. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Benjamin Ard, we meet at last. I am delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I love it. I'm excited to have you here. This is a subject we've never touched on the podcast, so I'm really excited to dive in and get your experiences. But before we do that, just like every other episode, Jordan, let's get to know your background and what do you love about content and marketing?
Sure. So I've been in the content and corporate marketing world for 14-ish years now. In the B2B tech space. And for the past 3.5 years or so, I've been in the cybersecurity world specifically. I was kind of contemplating the origin story for why I love all things content the other day. And I think it traces back to like a foundational memory in 4th grade. And I bet a lot of other content marketers or creators listening here have some kind of similar experience. But in 4th grade, I wrote a parody of Cinderella called Cinderadical, which I thought was just maybe the most hilarious thing in my 10-year-old brain. And it got published in the little school newspaper. And people on campus were reading it and reacting to it. And I think I kind of caught the bug there. And fast forward to today, I'm kind of doing the same thing. I mean, my job really has been to spearhead programs from brand awareness and demand generation that all rely on content that needs to draw some kind of reaction. And I'm still super amped when I see those reactions and results.
I love it. That's a great backstory. I love just that hook into content and the love for stories and content. So Jordan, this is a fun subject today, and I love that you brought this up as something we should talk about, affinity-based content, and how brands should maybe pay a little attention to this and maybe include this in their mix if they're not doing it now. But Jordan, for everyone out there, what is affinity-based content in the first place?
Yeah, well, brand affinity content, like you said, is an area of content marketing that's often overlooked or done haphazardly. I think we all know content marketing is a circuitous journey. It's not always a direct to revenue activity the vast majority of the time. Affinity content is really sort of that first impression content that can be fun, funny, happy, original. I think a lot of tech brands balk at this. Sometimes it's hard to be funny. Sometimes it's hard to make a connection between a complicated product to something that's fun and interesting. But this type of content can really be the start of a relationship and a feeling around your brand, that you want them to have. And the way that I kind of think of this is kind of like with a dating app, right? It's top of mind for me always. I met my husband through a dating app. And there's just so much to be gleaned from that process and applied to marketing. Because the first step in a relationship really, let's be real, is looking to like. You swipe right on someone because you like what you see or this tiny little blurb of information presented to you. It's enough to connect you in some kind of way, and make you dig deeper. And so I think something funny, unique, original, you're speaking to me like a person, not a prospect, so I'm into you. You can get to my problems and my pains in a minute. But first, maybe I just need a positive impression, a good feeling. And that's what brand affinity content really brings.
I love that. So you talked about it quickly. You want them to feel a certain emotion. That's the whole crux of affinity. How do you kind of understand how your brand plays into that and what emotion you want them to feel? Because I imagine obviously people want to have positive, happy, good vibes, but every brand is going to want slightly different emotions. How do you go about planning that and figuring that out and then ultimately translating that into your content to try to get people to feel that way?
You do need to take brand into account, definitely thinking about your brand promise and what you stand for, and kind of looking at your entire brand package can help you. You think about your tone and your voice that as a content marketer you set. You think about the design and what you're getting out there. For us personally, and a couple of brands I've worked at, that tone is really authoritative but approachable. So that's really the key there. And just making sure that you have the connection between your product or whatever you're talking about to something fun. Brand affinity content, it's not just fun for the sake of fun, it's fun and function. So you want to make sure that you can always make that tie. I actually listened in your case, to your Friday the 13th episode, that's a great example of what I'm talking about here, actually, with Brand Affinity. You interview a lot of really cool people on awesome topics. But as I was scrolling through your episode list, I thumb stopped there. Friday the 13th has some mystique, so it's grabby. And then in that episode, you messed around with some AI tech, which is obviously the playground you're in on the daily in your work. So you pulled me in with that topic. Now I'm interested in what you have to say about AI. I'm heading to your website to take a peek, and, down the funnel we would hopefully go. So you are your own example of good Brand Affinity content, whether you knew it or not.
I love it. I appreciate it. That makes me feel good about that episode. That was one that I've always had a question in my mind about, of like, having AI read something for me is kind of interesting, but the technology is there. So I love that. So here's a question. I feel like a lot of people in marketing already believe, all right, they know that they need to do this. But like you said, there's this dotted, crooked, misplaced line to revenue.
That's right.
How do you recommend people pitch this and get to that internal agreement and alignment around creating this kind of content? What would you recommend? How can people just like get people excited to say, yeah, we're going to just go get some good vibes, and that's going to start this funnel? How would you recommend they do that?
I mean, the number one way I think I would go about it is just asking them, what are the things that draw you into a brand? Like, what's something that's caught your eye recently on social media or a blog title or whatever the case may be? I think whether you're like a C-level executive or you're a technical person in the trenches, we all have kind of this commonality that we center around, where we want a little levity, we want a little humor. I think we're hardwired to, laugh and to scan for joy. And so I think people would readily tell you if something's going to bring me into a brand, that would be a way to do it. I've also found, I've got an example for you, that you can use also programs and things existing in your company to launch this initiative and show how they work together. So an example of how we let our audience kind of tell us what they want to dig into. I was at Nutanix for a little over 4 years, and we used a customer advocacy program. And, it's our customers, our user base. They would complete challenges for credits that would go to some sort of prize along the way. So maybe it'd be 50 credits to read a blog about a new product release, 20 credits to register for a webinar. You get the idea. And while it was primarily utilized by our customer marketing team, my content team and I leaped on the opportunity to farm out content from that audience and have fun. Here was a captive, motivated audience made up of people in our ICP, where we could get tons of information. So we started posting some really fun softball challenges, like what TV shows are you binging right now? There'd be some low point value associated with the question, 5, 10 credits, whatever. We'd get tons of responses, which we would analyze. So we'd see, okay, multiple respondents said Game of Thrones, the IT Crowd, and Rick and Morty. Those are actual answers that we got 4 years ago. I don't know if everyone's still watching those now. And that question was actually gold for us. Now we can connect what we do to kind of those pop culture moments. So we can write a blog, 10 lessons IT can learn from Rick and Morty. We've got an infographic, Game of Clouds, that kind of thing. And we know we're likely hitting on something that'll resonate with a broader, like-minded audience, and they'll ideally share or engage with. So this was a really appealing option because we're already using this platform, using this program, we're farming our audience. And that was just one jumping off point there. There was another challenge where we asked what some go-to newsletters or blogs or podcasts were, whatever people were consuming, as they're getting into their workday with a cup of coffee. Now from those answers, we know what publications we might want to advertise on, place articles, ask if we can be guests on their podcast. The customer advocacy platform is just one treasure trove where we were able to source that information. And I think the people, when we were pitching this idea of affinity content, being able to connect those dots, this isn't just fun in games. This helps us in a lot of ways down the road. This is multi-purpose fun. That seemed to really, really speak to them. And I think when you can show that, your execs in particular will much more readily get on board. This is someplace that is worth spending some time.
I love that. And those examples are amazing. I love how you went deep and found those TV shows, connected it to content. Because in B2B content, I'll be honest, I just wrote an article, 21 ways to get better at B2B SaaS writing. It's pretty good, but just imagine if I could tie that into something that my audience cares about, the TV show or common events or the political campaign or whatever it may be. So if someone doesn't have an affinity program, and it kind of sounds like a lot of people need to dive in because this is golden insights, but if they don't, what kinds of questions should you ask to discover these insights about people and what they're interested in, maybe the music, pop culture, things of that nature to make things interested? How do you dig in and kind of discover those nuggets? And then what's your process for pulling those out and figuring out how to put that in content and really articulate that and get people excited about it?
Yeah, gosh, that's a big question. Well, of course, like that advocacy program, I know not everybody has a platform like that. Of course, there are other ways like surveys and just listening. I'm heavily involved in social media. I have been at almost every single company that I've worked at, overseeing the teams or running it myself. Being able to get tuned in with social listening is really, really important. You're getting a lot of those cues and you can just see it's right there laid out in front of you. What are people engaging with that are in my audience? Taking a peek at that, it's easier than running a survey that you might send over email. Like, what are you into right now? That might not be the most successful way to go about it. But taking those cues from especially social media is definitely the best way to go about it. You can go down like Reddit rabbit holes too, for sure. Believe you me, I have done it. And then just making a repository of all these different pieces. I have sort of this file, which I look back at all the time, where I'll stick links whenever I see them. Like, wow, this was something really cool that somebody did. This is like fun with function. And I consult that all the time and just go back to it and add to it. And from there, you can really construct your plan. Once you have a few of these good examples, you can think about which ones will work best, with whatever your product is or whatever your vision is, and then put it together, make it a mix of, look at your content mix. Can this turn into a blog, into an infographic? Can this be a podcast topic? Can it be a video? Definitely being able to utilize video is super critical right now. You just look at the mix and see where you can slot it in.
I love it. So one final question, because these episodes are quick and to the point.
They're too quick.
They are a little too quick. It's fun. Yeah. So when you look at the affinity-based content, how are you measuring if something is hitting or missing? Obviously, like, again, there's not this great tie to revenue. Mm-hmm. But how do you know it's hitting the mark or it's missing the mark? How do you kind of judge that? And how do you kind of figure out how to make course corrections?
Yeah, also a crazy content question. And our content marketers know this too. It's not always easy to measure these things, especially when you're at the tippy top of the funnel and looking at what do people find fun or what makes them happy. But there are ways, for sure, if you have a blog post or something you put out there. I'm thinking of an example at Daz, where I'm at now. We wanted to do something cool for April Fool's Day. Happens to be my favorite holiday of the year. Simultaneous that at that time, we had promotions running for a huge cybersecurity conference, RSAC, where our company had a disco theme. And I ended up creating a faux blog post where I interviewed John Travolta and drew the connection between like Saturday Night Fever and our RSA presence. Created this blog. Then you have two ways to measure. You can see traffic to the blog. Was this something that was interesting to people enough that they clicked, they wanted to read the whole thing off of this bizarre image that they saw on social media? And then, of course, the post itself, you can see the engagement. I mean, those are definitely a couple ways where you can tie it in. Another one I can think of, we ran a virtual conference a couple companies ago, again, aligning with pop culture trends. When Cameo was all the rage. I don't know if people still do a bunch of Cameo videos.
Yeah.
They're still so much fun. I think it's so great. We used a cameo of Ernie Hudson to open our virtual conference, a former Ghostbuster, right? So somebody very entrenched in nostalgia and nerd culture. And the way that we measured the success of this was literally just watching the chat blow up. This was the opening to our conference. People were freaking out like, oh, it's Ernie Hudson. Who are you going to call? And, all of that. This was within seconds of the virtual conference starting. And immediately people had the good feels. They were having a great time. It didn't cost an arm and a leg. And we could just tell the success from that strictly from, the qualitative responses that were there. So, I mean, just a few ways to measure. It is nice when you can tie it back to some metrics. But luckily, when you do think through that process, fun thing, leads to another thing, registration for a conference or whatever. Did it go up? Did we get traffic to this post? Did we get traffic to our registration page? You can measure the effect of fun in that way.
I love that. Well, Jordan, I have learned a ton and I love the real examples. I am guessing there are going to be quite a few people that want to learn more from you and want to connect. how and where can they find you?
They can hit me up on LinkedIn, Jordan McMahon. I would love to make new friends, guys. So come on and link in with me.
I love it. Well, Jordan, again, thank you so much for the insights and everything today. I really appreciate it, and have a great day.
My pleasure. Let's do it again.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.